My ex-wife knocked on my door at 11:47 p.m., exactly one day after she lost her husband, and the first thing she said to me was, "I just can't sit over there." I hadn't seen Claire in 6 years. Not since the morning she slid the divorce papers across our kitchen table and couldn't even look me in the eye. Not since I said, "Claire, look at me," and she didn't. Not since I watched the only woman I ever loved, the woman who used to bring me coffee before sunrise, who cooked like it was a love language, who knew me in a way no one ever has since, walk out of my life and marry the rich man her father always wanted for her. So when I opened my door that freezing winter night and saw her standing there, still in the black dress from her husband's funeral that morning, no coat, snow melting in her hair, I forgot how to breathe. She didn't go to her mother. She didn't go to her sister. She didn't stay in that big, beautiful house her father spent his whole life pushing her toward. She came to me, the man she left. "I know I have no right to be here," she whispered, shaking. I can't sit over there one more minute. And God help me. Every wall I spent 6 years building came crashing down in a single second. But what she didn't know was that I still kept her photo in my desk drawer. But what I didn't know was the real reason her father tore us apart all those years ago. Or the secret Claire had been carrying since the day she said goodbye. I stepped aside. I opened the door wider. And I had no idea I was about to learn the truth that would either break me all over again, or finally bring her home. Scout heard her before I did. My dog lifted his head from the rug the moment her car pulled into the driveway. I'd been sitting at my desk pretending to grade papers, but really just staring at the same paragraph for 40 minutes, the way I did most nights when the house got too quiet and the quiet got too loud. I wasn't expecting anyone. I never was. When the knock came, it was soft, almost like she wasn't sure she should be doing it. 3 small taps. The kind of knock that says I'm here and I'm sorry at the exact same time. I opened the door, and the cold hit me first. Then she did. Claire, standing under the yellow porch light with snowflakes dissolving in her dark hair, still wearing the funeral dress, heels sinking slightly into the thin layer of snow on my front step. Her eyes were dry. That was the first thing I noticed. After everything. After burying her husband that morning. After a full day of holding herself together in front of family and friends and neighbors and God knows who else. Her eyes were completely dry. She had used all her tears up for the world. And now she was here, on my doorstep, with nothing left to perform. "I know I have no right to be here," she said. Her voice was steadier than her hands. I can't sit over there one more minute." I didn't say anything. What do you say to the woman who was once your whole world? What do you say to the person whose handwriting you still recognize on sight, whose laugh you can still hear perfectly in your memory, whose absence quietly shaped every decision you made for 6 straight years? What do you say when she's standing at your door in a funeral dress at midnight, shaking from the cold, and every logical part of your brain is screaming, "Be careful," but every human part of you just wants to get her out of the snow? I said nothing. I just stepped aside and opened the door wider. She walked in slowly, like she was afraid the floor might give way beneath her. She stopped in the middle of my living room and looked around, at the crooked bookshelves, at Scout, who walked straight to her and pressed his nose against her hand like he remembered her, at the small lamp in the corner that cast the room in the same warm amber light as the apartment we used to share. Something crossed her face when she saw that lamp. She didn't say what it was, but I saw it. I went to the kitchen without asking and put the kettle on. Because that was the only thing I knew how to do in that moment. That was the only language I had. She sat on the edge of my couch, not leaning back, not relaxed, just perched there like a woman who wasn't sure she deserved to be comfortable. And she watched me move around the kitchen with an expression I couldn't name. "You still don't have curtains in the kitchen," she said quietly. "I keep meaning to," I said. "You've been meaning to for 9 years. I've been busy." She almost smiled. Almost. I brought her the coffee the way she used to take it. 1 sugar, splash of cream, mug warmed first so it stayed hot longer. I set it in front of her and sat across the room in the armchair. Not beside her. Across from her. Because I needed the distance. Because 6 years of self-preservation doesn't just evaporate because someone knocks on your door. She wrapped both hands around the mug and stared into it. The silence between us wasn't awkward. That was the terrifying part. It was the silence of two people who had once known each other so completely that they didn't need to fill every moment with words. It was the silence of history. And history, I was learning all over again, does not care how many walls you build. It just waits. "How is Lily?" I asked, because I needed to say something real. She looked up. "She's with my sister tonight. She didn't understand why Daddy wasn't coming home. She kept asking me if he went on a trip." Her voice cracked on that last word. Just barely. But I heard it. "She's 5, Claire continued, steadying herself. "She thinks everything temporary. She thinks everyone comes back." The room went quiet again. I watched her sitting there. This woman I had loved completely. This woman who had cooked Sunday morning eggs and straightened my crooked bookshelves and underlined sentences in novels and somehow, impossibly, known me better than I knew myself. And I felt something I had spent 6 years trying to kill slowly stir back to life in my chest. I didn't want it to. I want to be clear about that. I had worked too hard. Hurt too long. I had dated 2 women after Claire. Good women, patient women. And both of them had eventually said the same thing. "You're still in love with someone else, Daniel." I didn't argue. Couldn't. Because they were right. And I had made peace with that. I told myself that some people only get one great love, and mine had simply come and gone, and the honorable thing was to accept it and live quietly around the edges of that truth. I had accepted it. But sitting across from her now, watching her hold that coffee mug with both hands the way she always did, watching snowflakes melt in her hair while Scout lay at her feet like no time had passed at all, I realized that accepting something and being free of it are 2 entirely different things. I was not free. I don't think I ever was. "Daniel," she said suddenly, softly, like she'd been building up to it. "Yeah. Why did you never fight for me?" The question landed like a stone dropped in still water. Slow. Expanding. Reaching every edge of me. I looked at her for a long moment. "I asked you to look at me," I said. "At the kitchen table. The morning you brought the papers." I said, "Claire, look at me. And you didn't." She swallowed. "I know," she whispered. "That was my answer," I said quietly. "I figured if you couldn't look at me while you were leaving, then you had already made your decision. And I wasn't going to beg a woman to choose me." Her jaw tightened. Her eyes went bright. The dangerous bright of someone holding back something enormous. "I couldn't look at you," she said slowly, "because I knew that if I did, I wouldn't be able to leave." The kettle had long gone cold. Neither of us moved. And in that moment, sitting across from each other in my small, imperfect, lamplit living room while the snow fell silently outside, 6 years of distance collapsed into something so small and so fragile and so terrifyingly alive that I had to look away first. Because I was starting to understand something dangerous. She hadn't come here because she had nowhere else to go. She had come here because this was the only place she had ever truly belonged. But she had left once before. And her father, the man who tore us apart without a single apology, was still out there. Still proud. Still powerful. And he had no idea his daughter was sitting in my living room at midnight. What would happen when he found out? And more importantly, what was the secret she still hadn't told me? The one I could see sitting right behind her eyes every time she almost said something and then stopped herself? I didn't know yet, but I was about to find out. She stayed that night. Not the way people assume when they hear that. She stayed the way a person stays when they have nowhere left inside themselves to go. Curled on my couch under the old gray blanket I pulled from the hall closet. Still in that black dress. Shoes placed neatly beside the coffee table like she still had habits worth keeping. I gave her the blanket and went to bed. Or at least I went to my room. I didn't sleep. I lay on top of my covers fully dressed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the absolute stillness of a house that suddenly felt different. Occupied. Warm in a way that had nothing to do with the thermostat. Scout had abandoned his usual spot at the foot of my bed and planted himself on the living room floor beside her. The traitor. And I lay there alone in the dark thinking about everything she had just said. "I couldn't look at you because I knew if I did, I wouldn't be able to leave." 6 years. 6 years I had carried the weight of that kitchen table moment. 6 years I had told myself that her inability to look at me meant she had stopped loving me. That her father's voice had simply grown louder than mine in her heart. that I had somehow failed to be enough. And now she was telling me the truth was the exact opposite. She looked away because I was too much. Because loving me was too real and too costly, and her father had made sure she understood, in that cold, precise way of his, exactly what that cost would be. I pressed the heels of my hands against my eyes. This was dangerous. All of it. Her being here. Me feeling this. The way the house already felt more like a home than it had in years. Just because she was breathing in the next room. I needed to be careful. I needed to remember that grief does extraordinary things to people. That a woman who buries her husband on a Tuesday and ends up on her ex-husband's doorstep by midnight has not arrived with a clear head or a settled heart. She arrived with a wound. And wounded people reach for what is familiar, what is safe, what was once good. I needed to remember that being her safe place tonight did not mean I was her forever. I needed to remember all of that. I fell asleep just before 4 a.m. trying very hard to remember it. I woke up to the smell of coffee. Real coffee. Not my usual rushed spoonful of instant, but the slow, deliberate, fills the whole house kind. The kind with cinnamon in it. The kind she used to make on Sunday mornings when neither of us had anywhere to be. I sat up slowly, blinked at the gray winter light coming through my curtains, listened. Sounds from my kitchen. Soft movements. The quiet clink of a pan. Something. And I cannot tell you why this specific thing nearly undid me completely. Something sizzling. I walked down the hallway and stopped at the kitchen doorway. She had found my apron. The old blue one hanging on the back of the pantry door that I honestly forgot I owned. She'd changed out of the funeral dress. I would find out later she'd found an old flannel shirt of mine folded in the hall closet, the one I used for painting, and she was standing at my stove in that flannel shirt and her bare feet, hair pulled back, making eggs, with fresh herbs. I don't know where she found fresh herbs in my refrigerator. To this day, I don't know. I wasn't a fresh herb kind of man. But somehow Claire Morgan could walk into any kitchen in the world and find ingredients that had no business being there and turn them into something that smelled like Sunday morning and second chances. She hadn't heard me yet. She was humming. Very quietly. Almost under her breath. Just barely enough to be called humming. More like the sound a person makes when their hands are busy and their mind is somewhere far away and music is the only thing keeping them tethered. I stood there in my doorway and watched her. And I thought, with a clarity that frightened me, this is what I lost. This exact thing. Right here. This woman in my kitchen in my flannel shirt with bare feet making eggs she shouldn't be able to make because she found herbs that shouldn't exist in my refrigerator. This is what her father decided wasn't worth keeping. She turned and saw me. She didn't startle. Just looked at me with those brown eyes and said, perfectly calm, sit down. It's almost ready. I sat down. Because what else do you do? She set the plate in front of me and sat across the table with her own mug of coffee, and we ate together in the quiet winter morning light, and it was so achingly familiar, so precisely like the mornings we used to share in our little apartment with the mismatched curtains, that neither of us spoke for a long time because I think we both understood that speaking would break whatever fragile, impossible thing was happening in that kitchen. Finally she said, I have to get Lily from my sister's by 10. Okay, I said. I didn't mean to stay. I know. I don't know why I came here, Daniel. I looked up at her. I think you do. She looked down at her mug. And she didn't argue. She came back that evening. With Lily. I opened the door and there was Claire. And beside her, holding her hand with both of hers, was the smallest person I had ever seen wearing the most serious expression I had ever seen on a child. Lily Whitfield was 5 years old. With Claire's brown eyes and dark hair and her late father's sharp, watchful way of taking in a room before deciding what she thought of it. She looked up at me from the doorstep, looked me up and down with the devastating honesty that only small children possess. Then she said, You have a dog. I do, I said. What's his name? Scout. She considered this. That's a good name, she decided, and walked past me into the house like she owned it, making a beeline directly for Scout, who was already wagging his entire back half with joy. Claire watched her go, then looked at me. I'm sorry. She's perfect, I said, and I meant it. Something moved across Claire's face when I said that. Something she quickly turned away from. But I saw it. They stayed for dinner. I made pasta, the only thing in my cooking repertoire that qualified as an actual meal, and Lily sat at my kitchen table with a box of crayons Claire produced from her bag and drew pictures while the pasta boiled. She drew Scout first, then the house. Then, without any prompting, without any explanation, she drew 3 figures standing in front of the house. A tall man, a woman, and a small girl. She pushed it across the table toward me when she was done. "That's you," she said, pointing to the tall figure. "And that's Mommy. And that's me." I looked at the drawing for a long moment. Then I looked at Claire. She was staring at the drawing with an expression so full and so complicated that I had to look away. "Can I keep this?" I asked Lily. She nodded seriously. "You have to put it on the refrigerator," she said. "That's the rule." "That's the rule," I agreed. And I put it on the refrigerator. They came back the next evening. And the evening after that. It happened gradually and then all at once, the way most real things happen. Lily began leaving her crayons at my house, so she didn't have to carry them back and forth. Claire began arriving earlier. Some evenings she cooked and I sat at the counter and we talked the way we used to talk. Easily, honestly, like 2 people who had never forgotten each other's rhythm. Other evenings I cooked my terrible pasta and Lily ate it with great diplomatic seriousness and told me it was pretty good in the tone of someone who was being extremely generous. I started sleeping again. I hadn't realized how poorly I'd been sleeping until I started sleeping well. Scout waited at the door every afternoon at the time they usually arrived. And God help me, I started planning dinners. Started making sure I had fresh herbs. Started fixing the one creaky floorboard in the hallway that had been creaky for 2 years because Lily had decided it was a monster and stepped over it every single time with a theatrical leap that made Claire laugh until her eyes watered. I was falling. I knew I was falling. And I knew it was either the most beautiful or the most dangerous thing that had happened to me in 6 years. Turned out to be both. It was a Wednesday evening, 3 weeks after that first knock. Claire and Lily had just left. I was washing the dinner dishes, still smiling at something Lily had said, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Is this Daniel Hayes?" The voice was older, deliberate, carrying the particular weight of a man who had spent his entire life making other people feel small. My hands went still in the sink. I knew that voice. I had not heard it in 8 years. But I knew it the way you know the sound of something that once hurt you, immediately in your bones before your brain has even finished processing. "Gerald," I said. A pause. "So she's there," he said. Not a question. I turned off the tap. Dried my hands slowly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't do that," he said. "Don't be clever with me, son." The word son in his mouth was not warmth. It was a blade wrapped in silk. "My daughter has a lot of people who care about her. People who are concerned about where she's been spending her evenings. People who thought she was grieving quietly at home." "She's grieving," I said carefully. "That's all. At your house." "Gerald." "I will come there, Daniel." His voice dropped. Quiet the way a storm gets quiet right before it destroys everything. "And you will not like that conversation. I kept my daughter away from you once. Do not make me do it again." The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen for a long time. Scout came and sat at my feet. I looked at Lily's crayon drawing on my refrigerator. The 3 figures. The house. The careful, deliberate way a 5-year-old had drawn a family without anyone asking her to. And I felt it, the old familiar cold. The one that lived in the memory of a kitchen table and divorce papers and a woman who couldn't look at me when she was leaving. The cold that whispered, "You are not enough. You were never enough. And no matter what is growing in this house right now, he will find a way to end it." I should have called Claire that night and told her. I didn't. And that silence, that one moment of trying to protect her from something she deserved to know, was about to cost us everything. He came on a Saturday. I heard the car first, expensive engine, unhurried, the kind of car that announces itself because it has never needed to apologize for taking up space. I was in the front yard throwing a ball for Scout when the black sedan pulled up to the curb and Gerald Morgan stepped out. 71 years old. Silver-haired. Dressed like a man attending something important, because for Gerald every moment was something important. He looked at me across the yard the way a man looks at an old problem he thought he'd already solved. He walked toward me slowly. "Gerald," I said. My voice was steady. I was proud of that. "Daniel." He stopped a few feet away, looked at the house, looked at Scout, looked at me. "You look the same." "You look older," I said. Something flickered in his eyes. Not quite amusement. More like the recognition that I was not the 28-year-old he had broken with a phone call and a checkbook and a father's authority anymore. "I'll say this simply," he said. "Claire is vulnerable. She just lost her husband. She is not thinking clearly. And whatever she thinks she is doing here, whatever you think is happening, it needs to stop. Claire is a 36-year-old woman," I said. "She makes her own decisions. She made her own decisions before, and look where it got her." His voice was perfectly controlled. That was the terrifying thing about Gerald Morgan. He never shouted. He never lost composure. He simply dismantled you with the calm precision of a man who had always believed he was right. "She is grieving, Daniel. She is lonely. She is reaching for something familiar because she is in pain. That is not love. That is desperation. And a decent man would recognize the difference." That one landed, because it was exactly what I had told myself that first night. Almost word for word. "She has a life," Gerald continued. "She has a daughter. She has a home. She has a community. She has people who are appropriate for where she is now. You are not appropriate. You were not appropriate then, and you are not appropriate now. You are a high school English teacher in a small house with a dog." He said it without cruelty. That was almost worse. He said it like a simple fact. Like weather. "I have nothing against you personally, Daniel. But my daughter deserves more than you can give her. She always has." I looked at him. And here is what I wanted to say, what was building in my chest like a tide against a wall. I wanted to say, "Your daughter used to bring me coffee before sunrise. Your daughter cooked like it was a love language. Your daughter knew every person in a room and what they needed before they knew themselves. Your daughter was rare, and she was brilliant, and she was the best thing that ever happened to me, and you traded all of that for a man with a bigger bank account, and look at where that left her. Standing at my door at midnight in a funeral dress. That's where your decision left your daughter, Gerald. So don't you talk to me about appropriate." That's what I wanted to say. What I actually said was, "Does Claire know you're here?" He paused. The briefest pause. "This is between you and me." "Then I think you should leave," I said quietly. "Because anything that concerns Claire should involve Claire. And I'm done being managed, Gerald. I'm done being decided about. If you have something to say it to your daughter." He looked at me for a long, measuring moment. Then he straightened, adjusted his jacket, and said very quietly, "I'm trying to protect her. And, God help me." I heard something in his voice I had never heard before. Not cruelty, not arrogance. Fear. A father's fear. Old and deep and real in a way that briefly, terrifyingly, made him human. "I know," I said, and I meant it. "But you can't protect her from herself, Gerald. You tried that once. Ask her how it felt." He held my gaze. Then he walked back to his car. And I stood in my yard with Scout at my feet and watched him drive away and felt the ground shifting beneath everything. Because I knew, with complete certainty, that this was not over. That he would go to Claire. That he would say things designed with a father's precision to make her doubt. To make her afraid. To make her feel the old pull of obligation and image and the belief that love alone was not sufficient currency for a life. He would go to her. And the question, the one that kept me awake that whole night, was not whether he would reach her. It was whether, this time, she would look up. She didn't come on Sunday. She didn't call. I told myself it was nothing. People have days. People with 5-year-olds and fresh grief and fathers who show up unannounced have complicated days. By Sunday evening, I put Lily's drawing in the desk drawer. Not face down. Just in the drawer. Where I wouldn't have to look at it and feel things I wasn't sure I was allowed to feel anymore. Scout waited at the door until 9 p.m. Then gave up and lay down with his chin on his paws and looked at me with the kind of eyes that dogs use when they understand something their owners haven't admitted yet. Monday morning I found the note. I don't know when she came. sometime before I woke up. She must have still had the spare key I'd never thought to take back. The note was on my kitchen counter, written on the back of one of Lily's crayon drawings, the only paper she could find, in Claire's careful, familiar handwriting. Daniel, I keep hurting you. I came here broken and I let you build something with us that I'm not sure I have the right to build. You deserved better than what I gave you 8 years ago. You deserve better than this now. A grieving woman showing up at your door, eating your food, letting her daughter draw pictures of a family on your refrigerator like we have any idea what we're doing. My father came to see me yesterday. He said things. Some of them were cruel. But some of them, and this is the part that scares me, some of them were true. I am vulnerable. I am not thinking clearly. And the last time I made a decision about you from an emotional place, it destroyed the best thing in my life. I can't do that to you again. I'm so sorry, Daniel. For then. And for now. Claire. I read it twice. Then I sat down at my kitchen table. The same table where 8 years ago she had slid divorce papers toward me and I had said, Claire, look at me, and she hadn't. I sat at that table for a long time. And then I did something I had not done in 6 years. I reached into my desk drawer, past Lily's drawing, all the way to the back, and I pulled out the photo I had kept face down for half a decade. Claire and I at the coast, the summer before everything fell apart, laughing at something neither of us could remember now, the ocean behind us, her hair wild in the wind, my arm around her, both of us completely unaware that we were standing in the last good summer we would share. I looked at it for a long time, and then I put on my coat, because I had stayed silent at a kitchen table once before. I had said look at me, and when she didn't, I had let her go. And I had spent 6 years wondering what would have happened if I had walked around that table instead. I was not going to wonder again. I drove to her house with my heart in my throat and no plan whatsoever. That's the truth. I had no speech prepared, no carefully constructed argument, no list of reasons why she should stay or why her father was wrong or why what we were building in my small imperfect house over the last 3 weeks was worth fighting for. I just drove, through the quiet Sunday morning streets of Portland, past the coffee shops just opening their doors, past the park where the first snow of winter was still sitting clean and untouched on the benches, past everything familiar and ordinary, while inside my chest something that had been dormant for 6 years was fully, terrifyingly awake. Scout was in the back seat. I don't know why I brought him. I just opened the back door and he jumped in like he'd been waiting for exactly this, and I figured he probably had better instincts than me at this point, so I let him come. I had Claire's address because she'd written it at the bottom of the note. I don't think she even realized she'd done it. Just automatic. Here is where I am. Here is where you can find me. Written by the hand of a woman who said she was leaving but left a map behind. The house was a beautiful house. Of course it was. Large and well-kept. In a quiet, tree-lined street where every lawn was perfect and every car in every driveway was new and everything looked exactly the way Gerald Morgan believed life should look. Ordered. Impressive. Expensive. The kind of house that photographs beautifully and echoes a little when you walk through it. I sat in my car outside for a moment. I won't pretend I wasn't afraid, because Gerald's black sedan was parked in the driveway. He was already there. I sat with my hands on the steering wheel and I thought about turning around. I thought about being reasonable. I thought about what Gerald had said. A decent man would recognize the difference, and I asked myself honestly the way I made my students ask themselves honestly about hard questions. Am I doing this for her? Or am I doing this for me? And the answer that came back was quiet and clear. Both. And that's not wrong. I got out of the car. Scout jumped out beside me and sat at my feet on the sidewalk, looking up at me like, well, what are we waiting for? I walked to the door and knocked. It was Gerald who opened it. Of course it was. He looked at me the way a man looks at something he specifically asked not to happen. His jaw tightened. His eyes went immediately past me to the car at the curb, calculating, assessing, and then came back to me with an expression that was not quite anger and not quite surprise. More like the grim recognition of a man who underestimated his opponent. Daniel, he said, flat as a closed door. Gerald, I said, I'd like to speak with Claire. This is not a good time. I know, I said. I'm here anyway. He stared at me. I held his gaze. This was different from the yard. In the yard there had been space, physical distance that allowed for the performance of civility. Here, in this doorway, there was none of that. It was just two men and the full weight of 8 years of consequence standing between them. "You are making a mistake," he said quietly. "I've made mistakes before," I said. "The biggest one was walking away from a kitchen table 8 years ago. I'm not making it again." Something shifted in his face. Not softening, Gerald Morgan did not soften. But something, a recalibration. Like a man who has been playing chess and has just realized his opponent is playing a different game entirely. He stepped back from the door. And there, at the end of the hallway, having clearly heard my voice, was Claire. She was in a sweater and jeans. Her hair down. She looked like she hadn't slept. She looked like she'd been crying, not recently, but the way a person looks when they cried for a long time and then stopped and haven't quite recovered the normal shape of their face yet. She looked at me, then at her father, then back at me. "Daniel," she said, "you shouldn't be here." "I know," I said, for the third time that morning. "Claire, I need 5 minutes." "She said you shouldn't be here," Gerald said from beside me. "Dad." Claire's voice was quiet, but it had an edge I hadn't heard before. "Please." He looked at her. Something passed between them, old and layered and complicated with all the weight of a daughter who has spent her life loving a father who loves her back in the only language he knows, which is control. She held his gaze. And he, slowly, stiffly, with the bearing of a man making a tactical retreat he refuses to call a retreat, walked past me into the living room and sat down. Claire looked at me. 5 minutes, she said. She led me to the kitchen. It was a beautiful kitchen. Marble countertops. Professional appliances. The kind of kitchen designed by someone who understood what kitchens were supposed to look like without understanding what kitchens were actually for. There were no herbs on the windowsill. I noticed that. Claire stood with her back against the counter and her arms folded. Not in hostility, but in the way of someone holding themselves together by physically holding themselves, and looked at me with eyes that were tired and frightened and something else. Something underneath the tired and the frightened that she was working very hard to keep underneath. "You read the note," she said. "I read the note. Then you know why." "Claire." I said her name the way I had said it once before at a different kitchen table in a different life. Quietly, directly, like it was the only word that mattered. "I'm not here to argue with your father. I'm not here to talk you into anything. I just need to say one thing. And then I'll go if you want me to go." She searched my face. "Say it," she whispered. I took a breath. 8 years ago I sat at our kitchen table and I watched you slide those papers toward me and I said, "Claire, look at me." And when you didn't, I decided that meant you had made your choice. I decided that meant you were done. I decided to be dignified and quiet and let you go without a fight because I thought that's what loving someone looked like. I paused. I was wrong. That wasn't love. That was fear. I was afraid that if I fought for you and you still left, it would be worse. So I protected myself and I called it respect, and I have spent 6 years sitting with that decision. Her eyes were bright now. She didn't speak. "I'm not doing it again," I said. "I'm not walking away from another kitchen. Not because I think you owe me anything. Not because I think grief hasn't complicated everything you're feeling. Not because I have any idea what the right answer is or what comes next or how any of this works." I looked at her. "But because you came to my door at midnight and you didn't call anyone else first. And you made eggs with herbs you shouldn't have been able to find. And your daughter put us on a refrigerator. And I am not, I refuse to be, the man who decides that doesn't mean anything just because it's complicated." The silence in that kitchen was enormous. Claire uncrossed her arms. Her hands dropped to her sides, and her chin, just barely, began to tremble. "Daniel," she said. Her voice was almost gone. "There's something I never told you." I went still. "About why I left." "Claire." "No." She shook her head. "You came here to say your thing. Let me say mine." I waited. She looked at the marble countertop for a moment, collected herself, then looked back up at me with eyes that were carrying something heavy and old. Something she had been carrying so long that it had become part of her posture, part of the careful way she held herself, part of the exhaustion that lived just behind her expression when she thought no one was watching. "My father didn't just threaten to cut off the family," she said. "The week before I brought you those papers, when he gave me his ultimatum, I know what he threatened. You don't know all of it." She took a breath. "He told me that if I stayed with you, he would pull the funding from your school." I stared at her. Jefferson High was running a deficit that year. You knew that. Everyone knew that. My father was one of 3 private donors who were keeping the arts program alive, keeping half the teaching positions funded. He told me that if I didn't end the marriage, he would withdraw his contribution. Quietly, without any connection to us. No one would ever know why the funding disappeared. Her voice dropped. "But we would know. You would know. Because you would lose your job, Daniel. The thing you loved most in the world after me. Your classroom, your students, the English department you had spent 4 years building. You would lose all of it. And he would make sure no other district in Portland would hire you either." The kitchen was absolutely silent. "He had the connections to do it," she continued. "You know he did. And she stopped. "I was 28 years old. I was terrified. And I thought if I stayed and let that happen to you, you would eventually resent me for it. That I would become the reason your life got smaller. And I couldn't." Her voice broke. "I couldn't be the thing that cost you everything. So I decided to cost you me instead. Because I told myself, that you would find someone else. That you would heal. That losing me would hurt less than losing your whole career." A tear ran down her face. She didn't wipe it. "I have carried that," she whispered. "Every single day. Every single day I told myself I did the right thing. That I protected you. And then Richard died and I was sitting in that house alone, and the only thought in my head, the only clear thought I had, was that I needed to tell you the truth. Even if you hated me for it. Even if you told me to leave. I just needed you to know that I didn't leave because I stopped loving you." She looked at me with those completely open, completely exhausted eyes. "I left because I loved you too much to watch him destroy you." I couldn't speak. I don't know how long I stood there. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticked. Outside, Portland was going about its quiet Sunday morning. And in this kitchen, this cold, beautiful, perfect kitchen with no herbs on the windowsill, 8 years of a story I had been telling myself the wrong way was being rewritten in real time. She hadn't stopped loving me. She had loved me so completely, so selflessly and so desperately, that she had absorbed all the pain herself rather than let it touch me. And she had spent 8 years alone with that. "Claire," I said. My voice didn't sound like my own. "Look at me." She looked up. "I'm still here," I said. "You didn't lose me." And she broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. The way a person breaks when they have been holding something for so long that release doesn't feel like relief. It feels like the ground disappearing beneath your feet, like every muscle letting go at once, like coming apart at every seam simultaneously. I crossed the kitchen, and I held her. She pressed her face into my shoulder and cried the way she hadn't cried all day at the funeral, the way she hadn't cried at my house in the lamplight, the way she hadn't cried in 8 years of a quietly wrong life. She cried from somewhere deep and real and ancient in her. And I held her and said nothing because there are moments when words are simply not the right size for what's happening. I held her in that cold, beautiful kitchen, and I felt her shoulders, slowly, gradually, breath by breath, begin to still. We didn't hear Gerald come in. I don't know how long he had been standing in the kitchen doorway. Long enough. His face, when I looked up and saw him, was not the face of the man in the yard or the man in the doorway. It was older, quieter, carrying something I had seen a ghost of before. That brief, terrifying flash of fear, but fuller now, more exposed. He was looking at his daughter, not at me, at Claire, in my arms, face tear-streaked, finally breathing. And whatever he saw in her face, whatever a father sees when he looks at his child and realizes, for the first time with complete clarity, what his love cost her, it moved across his features like weather, like a slow and necessary storm. He looked at me. I looked back at him. "She told you," he said, not a question. "She told me," I said. He was quiet for a long moment. Claire lifted her head. looked at her father with red eyes and a steadiness that I think surprised him. The steadiness of a woman who has just put down something very heavy and discovered she can stand straight without it. "Daddy," she said, softly, "I need you to let me live my life." His jaw worked. "I only ever wanted." "I know what you wanted," she said. "But what I needed, what I have always needed, was for you to trust me. A beat. I need that now. I need you to look at this man and see what I see. Not his salary. Not his house. Not what he looks like on paper." Her voice was quiet, but it did not waver. "See who he is, Dad. Please. Just this once. See who he is." Gerald Morgan looked at me, and I let him look. I didn't straighten, didn't perform, didn't try to be more impressive than I was. I was a 38-year-old English teacher in a coat I'd grabbed in a hurry, with my dog waiting outside and no plan and no speech. Just the absolute stubborn refusal to walk away from another kitchen. Gerald looked at me for a long time. Then he looked at his daughter. Then he did something I had never seen Gerald Morgan do in all the years I had known him. He looked at the floor. "I made mistakes," he said, quietly, each word clearly costing him something. "I thought I was protecting you." "I know, Dad. I don't." He stopped, started again. "I don't know how to do this differently. I don't know how to." He pressed his lips together. "But I don't want to lose you. I don't want to be the reason you." "Then don't be," Claire said simply. The clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Gerald Morgan. Proud. Image-obsessed, cold-handed Gerald Morgan. Nodded once. Small and stiff and enormously costly. And then he looked at me and said, in the voice of a man learning a new language at 71, "Take care of my daughter." "I will," I said. "I always was going to." He nodded again, and walked out of the kitchen. We heard the front door open and close. We heard his car start in the driveway. And then it was just Claire and me, standing in the kitchen, the silence different now, lighter, cleaner, like air after rain. She looked up at me. "What do we do now?" she whispered. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I think we just start. Slowly, carefully. We figure it out." "I have a 5-year-old, she said. "I know. She's already claimed my refrigerator." She laughed. A small, real, exhausted laugh. The most beautiful sound I had heard in 6 years. "Scout is outside," I said. "You brought Scout." He had opinions about staying home. She laughed again, shook her head, looked at me with those brown eyes and that one dimple on the left side. The same dimple that had been there in the coffee shop when she was 24 and deciding whether I was interesting or insufferable. "Do you remember what you said to me?" she asked. "That first day, in the coffee shop. I told you you'd underlined the wrong line. You were so sure of yourself." "I was right." "You were right," she agreed. She took my hand. Her fingers were cold. She was always cold. I had forgotten that. She ran cold and I ran warm, and she used to put her freezing feet against my legs in the night, and I used to pretend to object and never actually did. And I held them in both of mine and felt 8 years of distance close, like a book being finished. Not ended. Finished. The way good books finish, with the sense that the story is still going, just beyond the last page, in a direction you can feel but can't quite see yet. "I have to go get Lily," she said softly. "I know. She's going to want to see Scout. Scout will be devastated if she doesn't." She squeezed my hand. Then she reached up, slowly, carefully, with the tenderness of someone handling something they have broken once and refused to break again, and put her palm flat against my jaw. And I leaned into it, like a man coming home. That evening, the 3 of us sat on my living room floor. Lily had declared that dinner should be a picnic. Inside, because outside is cold. And so we had spread a blanket and eaten sandwiches surrounded by crayon drawings and Scout's enthusiastic presence and the particular, unrepeatable joy of a 5-year-old who has decided that a situation is exactly correct. After dinner, Lily fell asleep between us on the blanket. One hand curled under her cheek. One hand resting on Scout's back, with the complete and total trust of a child who has decided she is safe. Claire and I sat in the lamplight on either side of her. Not touching, not needing to, just there, present, together in the specific, quiet, unspectacular way that is somehow the realest form of love. Not the falling in love love. Not the grand gesture love. The staying love. The showing up at midnight love. The fresh herbs in the refrigerator love. The I'll hold your hand while you break and still be here when you're done love. Claire looked at Lily sleeping. Then she looked at me. She drew us on your refrigerator, she said softly. First thing she did, I said. She's never done that before. Drew a family with, she stopped. With, she met my eyes. With someone who wasn't Richard. The lamp hummed. Lily breathed steadily. Scout's tail moved once, slowly, in his sleep. Daniel, Claire said, very quietly. Thank you for opening the door. I looked at her across our sleeping girl and my ridiculous dog in my small imperfect lamplit living room, and I thought about the photo in my desk drawer. The coast. The last good summer. Both of us laughing at something we couldn't remember. The ocean behind us, completely unaware of everything that was coming. I thought about the note on the back of a crayon drawing. I thought about 3 taps on a door at 11:47 p.m. that changed everything. And I thought, with a clarity so clean and so complete that it settled in my chest like something finally finding its proper weight, that some stories don't end when you think they do. Some stories just take the long way home. I never locked it, I said. She smiled. And the snow fell silently outside. And we sat in the light. The end. And now, before you click away, I need to ask you something. Think carefully before you answer. Claire left the man who truly loved her. Not because she stopped loving him, but because she loved him so deeply she was willing to destroy herself to protect him. She carried that secret alone for 8 years. She built a whole life around a sacrifice nobody knew she made. And here is the question that should keep you up tonight. How many people in your life right now are loving you in silence? Carrying something heavy on your behalf, making sacrifices you can't see, staying quiet when they should speak, because they love you too much to let you carry the weight yourself. And more importantly, are you the Daniel who finally walks to the kitchen? Or are you still sitting at the table, waiting for someone to look at you first? Think about that. And if someone came to mind just now, don't wait for midnight and a snowstorm. Pick up the phone. Today.